On December 25, 1991, the Soviet flag came down from the Kremlin for the last time. No invasion, no revolution in the streets, no final battle. A nuclear superpower with 11 time zones, the largest military on Earth, and enough warheads to end civilization just stopped existing peacefully. And the strangest part? It took less time to collapse than it took you to finish high school. So how does the second most powerful country in human history fall apart in under 2 years without anyone firing a shot to stop it? I'm Arjo, and this is Empires Undone. Let's find out. At its height, the Soviet Union wasn't just a country, it was half of the entire global power balance. 15 republics, nearly 300 million people, the first satellite in space, the first human in orbit. A military that NATO planned its entire existence around containing. If you lived in Moscow in 1975, the idea that this would all be gone in 16 years would have sounded insane. The USSR looked permanent, unbeatable even. So what actually happened? 3 forces all colliding at once. Problem number 1. The Soviet economy looked powerful from the outside but was quietly falling apart on the inside. The entire system ran on central planning. Government bureaucrats in Moscow decided how much bread, steel, and shoes the whole country needed, then ordered factories to produce exactly that. The problem is that's an impossible job. You can't predict the needs of 300 million people with a 5-year plan written by committee. By the 1980s, this meant chronic shortages of basic goods. People stood in line for hours just to buy bread or toilet paper. Meanwhile, the government kept reporting impressive growth numbers that bore less and less resemblance to actual daily life. An empire can survive a lot. It cannot survive its own people, losing faith that the system works. Problem number 2. The Soviets were trying to match the United States dollar for dollar in a military spending contest, with a fraction of the economy to pay for it. For decades, the USSR poured a staggering share of its national output into tanks, missiles, and nuclear weapons, just to keep pace with the US. Then, in 1979, they invaded Afghanistan. It was supposed to be quick. It turned into a 9-year war that drained money, soldiers, and morale, with no real victory at the end of it. Historians now regularly call it the Soviet Union's Vietnam. A war that didn't just fail to achieve its goal, it actively bled the country dry while the goods shortages back home kept getting worse. Problem number 3 is almost ironic. The man who tried to save the Soviet Union accidentally sped up its collapse. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev became leader and introduced 2 big reforms. The first was glasnost, openness. For the first time, people could publicly criticize the government without immediately disappearing. The second was perestroika, restructuring. An attempt to loosen the rigid economy and allow a little market freedom. Here's the problem. Once people were finally allowed to speak freely, they didn't praise the system. They said what they'd been thinking for decades, that it wasn't working. And once the economy started loosening without a real plan, it didn't get fixed. It got worse, fast. Gorbachev had opened the door hoping for gradual reform. Instead, the whole structure rushed through it at once. But here's what makes this collapse genuinely unique in world history. The Soviet Union didn't get invaded. It didn't lose a war that ended it. It wasn't overthrown by a revolution in the streets. One by one, starting in 1990, The republics that made up the USSR simply voted to leave. Lithuania first, then Latvia, Estonia, Ukraine, and the rest followed within months. By December 1991, there was technically nothing left to be the leader of. Gorbachev resigned not because he was forced out by violence, but because the country he was president of had legally voted itself out of existence. The most powerful military on Earth, armed with thousands of nuclear weapons, didn't fire a single shot to stop its own collapse. From the ashes, 15 new independent countries emerged: Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and a dozen others, each starting over from scratch. Just like Rome, the empire didn't simply vanish. It transformed into something else entirely: a broken economy, an unwinnable war, reforms that opened the floodgates instead of relieving the pressure. Three forces that brought down one of the two most powerful nations on Earth without a single battle to mark the end. The lesson is the same one Rome taught us. No empire is too big, too armed, or too powerful to collapse from the inside. Next time on Empires Undone, we're going further back to one of the largest land empires ever built. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll see you in the next video.